Hi there, welcome back to Marky RC. On this video, I'm going to do another beginner's guide to building Tamiya's Saint Dragon, which is pretty much the same as the Fire Dragon chassis wise. Tamiya have used this chassis for years now. I think it was a Thundershot was the first one on this particular chassis. Get quite a few hop ups for this particular buggy. Ball races, universal drive shafts, and the DFO3 aluminium shocks. Going to be, like I say, a beginner's guide. Putting one of these together, I'll go through the manual page by page, lay everything out like some of the other build videos I've done, and show you how to put one of these buggies together. These are on special offer at the moment, £109, which is exceptionally good value for this particular style of chassis. So let's get the box open, get the manual out, and start putting this buggy together. Right, we've got Tamiya's manual out now for the Saint Dragon. First page, basically about connecting all your radio equipment up first. I'm not going to run this particular buggy because I've got a runner already, but the first page normally tells you what tools you need, screwdrivers, side cutters, and all the other tools needed to put together. Like I've said in prior videos, if you're going to be putting a lot of Tamiya buggies together, get a JIS screwdriver set. Tamiya will do a really cool one pretty much for putting all these cars together. I think they're about £25. Because Tamiya screws aren't Phillips or Posi, they are Japanese industrial standard, which the Tamiya screwdrivers are. So page 2, basically put your radio, how to put all your radio equipment together. So you'll have a receiver, a servo, and a speed control. What I like to do, normally if I'm going to run a buggy, I'll wire everything up first, servos and everything, make sure it all works. Because like I've said in prior videos, there's nothing worse than having to take a car apart because there's a servo that's faulty or something's not working correctly. It tells you how to set up whether you're going to run a stick control or a steering wheel control. I prefer the steering wheel, but some old school RC people, they like stick still. So that's page 3, and a little warning notice, you know, don't run it near people or try to keep it from crashing into anybody and hurting anybody, because that's not really ideal. So we get onto page 4, that's where the manual starts. Inside the box you'll get a load of part bags, part bag A, and on the manual it'll tell you at the top what part bag you need to be on. So like start on part bag A, and as you work through the manual you'll end up finding at the top of the page it'll say part bag B, and so forth as you go through the manual. Get some jars or little pots, and in the part bag A, you'll get a load of different little bags. What I like to do is tip each bag into a separate container, because that way, normally when you're building these sort of mid-range buggies, each stage of the manual is basically one of these little bags, so you'll get enough screws and like the motor pinion for that particular stage of the buggy or car or whatever you're putting together. And it just makes it easier finding your screws and everything when you come to that particular stage of the build. Plastic bushings I'm going to be putting in this one because I'm not going to be running it, so there's no point spending out £8–9 on some bushings. But if you're going to run it, it is worth upgrading to metal bearings. You'll get a little bit more run time and everything does run a lot freer. But like I say, I'm not running this, so I'm not too bothered about that. Tamiya are also supplying this kit. It's quite a cool little, almost like a hop-up part, aluminium motor mount, which should take a little bit of heat out of motors if you're running like a hot or brush motor. So we start on page 4, which is basically putting differentials together. So I'll lay all the parts out because on the side of this guide it's 1:1, so when you put a part on it matches up perfectly with the guide. And then that way you can't put screws because they range from sort of 10, 12, 14 and 16 mil screws. And if you put the wrong size screw in somewhere, one, it might not actually hold that part together properly if it's too short, or if it's too long and you wind it into a gearbox, it can make an awful mess of your gears. So let's lay all these parts out for the first pages 4 and 5, and I'll show you what they all look like. Right, here we have the manual, pages 4, pages 5, and then we've got all our parts laid out, all of our gearbox internals and differentials. You just need to make sure that when you're putting these shafts in that you use the correct one, because they're all slightly different. Then we've got our differential housings and our 3 geared diff, a few E-clips and some brass bushings. Then we've got the infamous A5 part. If you're going to be running this buggy hard with a brushless motor, probably best to upgrade this part. It's renowned for snapping. I've never snapped one myself, but it seems to be a lot of people have. They do aluminium and 3D printed parts. And we've got our gearbox housing, same again, that very, very hard plastic. The little covers that hold the centre shaft that drives the front and rear gearboxes together. And then the other 2 gearboxes for the front of the buggy, rear of the buggy, sorry. And the rest of our parts left over for the next parts of the build. Same again, I'm not using bearings, no point when I'm not running it, and all of our hardware. So I'll pop all these parts together and I'll show you what it looks like. And while I'm building the differentials, I'll just do a little short video of how I grease and put these together. They are very, very hard plastic again, so I'm assuming they can take a good bit of punishment from a brushless system. So I'll start to pop all those bits together and then I'll show you what it all looks like. Right, this is how I put one of Tamiya's diffs together. Get my case in. You get a tiny little thrust washer. I put a couple of dabs of grease on that, keep that lubricated. And I pop it onto one of the bigger gears, put a little dab of grease on the back of that. And then you put that inside the case so it seats in the bottom. Give it a couple of spins just to get that grease around. Then we take one of our little star things, and 3 of the little like planetary gears almost. Facing inwards, pop the gears onto there. Like so. And then inside the diff you can see there's 3 little cutouts. This is the tricky bit, trying to get the gears in without them falling off of the little shaft. So they should fit inside like that, no binding. And then what I like to do, put a dab of grease in between each gear and a dab on the top. Then repeat the process, one of those big gears, one of these little thrust washers, a little bit of grease on the back. Put the washer on. A little bit of grease on the top of each gear. And you place that top gear onto the top like so. Make sure it meshes. You can give it a couple of spins just to make sure everything's seated properly. And then you get one of these bigger gears, which is the outside of the diff. Pop that onto the top so the holes line up with the ones below. Make sure the holes are all nicely lined up. Don't need to thread lock these because it's metal into plastic, so that's not going to come undone. And you don't need to wang these up super tight, because you'll just strip the threads out. And then what I like to do, I just basically nip it up right the way around the diff. These are pretty stout differentials actually. You can't really go in a star pattern on these, so it is just a case of tightening it down until it feels, you know, semi-tight, and you're not having to put 400 foot-pounds of torque on your screwdriver, like so. And that is basically how to put one of them diffs together. So you just repeat that process twice, because there's two diffs, one in the front, one in the back. So I'll put the rest of these parts together and show you what it all looks like when it's constructed. I couldn't do it. I couldn't put a gearbox together without using bearings, as much as hard as I tried. So we got some metal bearings in the gearbox, some ones I found from other kits that were left over. Simple case of getting your differential. Follow the instructions. Make sure you put it in the right way round, bulbous side in. That's basically one side of the gearbox. Then you get the other gear cog, which basically just slides onto there. And then you've got a cutout in the shaft to make it fit through. That basically pops into that side of the gearbox. Everything runs lovely and smooth because of the bearings. I mean, you don't need them, but I just couldn't put this together without using them. And then basically pop the two halves together. So you've got part A1, part A2, pop them together. As such, you get that nice click, and that's pretty much it. Put the hardware in like stated on the drawing, and then you get a part for the front that basically locks it all together, pops on like so, and then pop all the screws in. So I'll put the rest of the other parts together and show you what it looks like when we've got all the gearboxes put together. Right, got this little shaft, a bearing, an E-clip, part E1, which is a off-centered washer, and then a thrust washer, then your gear, and then a little 850 bearing on the end, like so. Take your gearbox housing, pop everything inside, like so. Got no binding. Then you get another one of those plastic gears, you pop that on the top. I've pre-lubricated those gears. And then you need to put, on the top of that, you need to put another thrust washer, like so. And another one of the E1 parts, little plastic washer in there. And then when it all goes together, it'll all be nice and free running, which that is. So I'll pop all the screws in, put the other gearbox together, and then I'll show you what they all look like when they're all built up. Right, here we have the gearbox all built up now. Should resemble something looking like that. We've also got the other gearbox with its propeller shaft joint in and a bearing. And then we've got all of our gearbox front gearbox parts all laid out. That lovely aluminium motor mount, 540 silver can. And as you can see at the top of that page there, on page 7, we're now starting on part bag B. So same again, take all the parts out, stick them in some little jars or pots, and then you've got each stage of the build in each pot, and it does make it a lot easier to sort out. So I'll get all those parts popped in the pots, and then get it all laid out and show you the next parts of the build. I've opened part bag B now. So we've got some plastic bushings because I've run out of bearings, but they're for the wheels, so that's not too important. I can always change them at a later date if I ever decide to run it. We've got our axles, which are steel. Same with the out drives. Everything in these kits is lovely, nice and strong steel. Then we've got our anti-roll bar, our drive shafts, and some long hardware and screws. So next page, page 6, is installing all the motor and putting the front gearbox together. So we've got all the parts laid out. So I'll stick all those bits together and show you what it's going to look like. Right, I've attached the aluminium motor mount. Make sure you thread lock those 2 screws, otherwise they will come loose if you're going to run this buggy. And the same with the little grub screw that goes into the pinion. And when you're putting the pinion on, obviously make sure the grub screw is on the flat part of the output shaft of the motor. To put the motor on, you get like a brass sleeve. You must put them on, otherwise they will distort the gearbox. They almost act like a sort of like a brace, so as when it's to that point it can't go any tighter. Same with any metal into metal on the RCs. I've already put one of the screws in the little brass collars in. This had a tiny little dab of thread lock. It just helps and stops things coming loose. Do one screw at a time, otherwise they will keep falling out. Pop your motor onto the side. It's got like a little relief in the side of the chassis. And then do the screw up from the top. It's a fixed position, so you can't change where the motor mount goes, but you can change the motor on it, the mount itself. And the same again, apply a tiny little dab of thread lock, because the last thing you want is your motor falling off. Must admit, of all of Tamiya's sort of RC gearboxes, these are one of the easiest ones to put together. You haven't got little shims or you're having to set the gear mesh. It's pretty much done for you. What size pinion is this? Got a 15 tooth pinion in this motor, but I think you can go a couple of pinions either way if you want to up gear or down gear. And there we have it. Tamiya's motor now, mounted on its aluminium mount. Super rigid, and those little brass tubes just stop you crushing any part of the transmission. So we've got our rear gearbox built now, front gearbox built, all fully ball raced, even though I said I wasn't going to put bearings in, but I have. So now we're on to page 7, which is starting to install A-arms, shock towers, the rear cage, and the rear hubs and the rear knuckles. So I'll get those pages built up and I'll show you what it's going to look like. Right, here we have all the A-arms laid out now, and the rear bash guard and the rear shock tower. Steel drive shafts, really strong. And we've got fixed links, so for the beginner, if you're putting one of these together for the first time, you haven't got to worry about putting all your turnbuckles together. You can always upgrade them later if you want to have adjustability in your suspension, but for now everything's set exactly the same. So I'll get all those suspension parts mounted and show you what it looks like when they're mounted to the rear gearbox. Just a quick one, if this is like for the beginners, first time building one of these kits, you get the out drives for the gearboxes. You need to put one of these little black O-rings. Needs to sit in the centre of there, and if you use the drive shaft end, you can push it right in and seat it down nice and flat, like so. then it should look a little bit like that, if you can see that on the camera. So the O-ring's laying flat. If you forget to put them in, you'll just end up with your drive shafts chattering backwards and forwards. So I'll get the rest of this put together, show you what it looks like. Right, here we have the rear gearbox all put together now. No binding, drive shafts are in. Very little wiggle on these models when they're new. They're pretty rigid. Got a front gearbox built up there. Then we've got all the hardware laid out, out drives, ball studs, and the little step screws. And then we've got all the rear shock laid out there. Got our shock bodies, shock lids, bottom cap, the bottom seat for the spring to sit on, and a large, medium and small compression collar to make the suspension stiffer. All just seem, the new Tamiya kits all seem to come with these lovely little anodised standoffs now. And we've got Tamiya's standard red bladder to fit in the top, and then just a couple of spacer bushings. We're using Tamiya's soft oil in this. I think it's about a 400 weight if I remember rightly. It's in, yeah, I think it's 400 weight. So I'll get all those parts popped onto the buggy and build those shocks up and show you what it looks like. Right, how to put together one of Tamiya's CVA shocks. Medium spring rate, soft oil, 3 compression collars on the top. So what I like to do, I've already put the little 3-hold plunger on the end with 2 E-clips. I didn't do that on camera because E-clips are my nemesis and they seem to disappear into a void of E-clips. But this time I've got all 4 on with no problem. So they do supply a couple of extra ones in the kit just in case they go flying and you can never find them. So I take a shock body, poke the shaft and the piston down into the shock. I like to put a little dab of shock oil on the top and down the shaft. It just makes the O-ring slide on easier. Hold the shaft, pop the O-rings on. You get 2 O-rings for this. Some CVAs have a little plastic washer in between, but these ones don't. Add a little bit more oil on the O-rings. Put your bottom cap on. And now, because it's all nice, you've got that silicone oil on there, you haven't got to worry about anything pinching up. Pull the shock to its lowest position. Fill it up with oil. I'll get about 3/4 of the way. And then I like to cycle the shock. Just pull some oil underneath the that little plunger. Fill the rest up so it's sort of level with the top. Then I'll get the O-ring. I'll give it the top of the O-ring a little wipe with some oil. Poke the bladder in the top. And because you've lubricated the top of that bladder, you've got no chance of it pinching. And the top screws on really well. I'll just do them up finger tight. You should push it in and you should get a little bit of rebound out the shock, which is the bladder pushing the oil down. And you get the bottom mounting point like a little eye. These are these are pre-threaded, so it makes them very easy to put those on. Like so. Take your spring, pop your spring on. Pop your bottom cap on, like so. And then you can add your adjusters. A large, a medium, I can pick it up. A large, a medium and a small collar. And there you have it. One oil filled CVA Tamiya shock, medium spring, soft weight oil. I mean, they are pretty good shocks. and they do behave really well, and the seals hold really well. So that's how I put those CVA shocks together. So I'll pop them onto the more back of the chassis now and show what it looks like. Here we have the shocks mounted now onto the rear of the rear gearbox. Lovely and smooth, no binding, and absolutely no wiggle whatsoever. I just don't understand why all Tamiya's cars don't have any wiggle. Some of the later ones have been absolutely outrageous for wigglage. But anyway, got the rest of the parts, all the front suspension arms, same again, the same as the rear, exactly the same size fixed link. Got a C-hubs and front steering knuckles, which are really hard plastic. You get a couple of, get a mounting point where the ball stud goes. Steel axles. And we got steel out drives. So everything is really, really strong on these buggies. So I'll pop all those parts on and show you what it looks like. Well, here we have the front end built up now. Just a little note there. That bolt needs to be 27mm. If you empty your part bags into each individual container or jar or whatever you're going to use, there will be one longer nut and bolt, 27mm. I don't know whether sometimes people put the 25mm in and that's what weakens that A5 part, but make sure you get the 27 for that particular part. But apart from that, front end's all built up, all the A-arms are attached, all the knuckles, all the ball studs. So next stage of the build is to add the front stabiliser bar, which is like a sprung steel, front steel drive shafts, shock towers and all the anti-roll bar fittings. And then we've got our front CVA shocks to put together, which are really short and they're a slightly thinner bore. Same again, really soft spring on the front, that's what it feels like. We've got all our bladders and little rod shafts, E-clips and all the other little bits and bobs to put the shocks together. So I'll put all those bits onto the front of the chassis and show you what it all looks like when it's put together. Right, we're on to page, just completed page 9. Getting the drive shafts and everything put together on the front end with the wishbones. Everything put together on there now, no binding, all nice and smooth. Absolutely no wiggle in anything at all. Now we're coming to put one of these anti-roll bars together, which can be a little bit tricky. So what I like to do is get the anti-roll bar drop link and the little brass ball that you've got to screw on and pop that in first, because they are quite tight to get in, those little balls. Just line it up, pop it in, and then you can thread the rod. If you hold the back of the ball and spin the rod round inside, eventually it will catch. So eventually it will catch. And then hold the back of the little brass ball so you can wind the rod in. And just grasp the ball. It's just really difficult otherwise, because trying to push that ball into that stud when everything's connected is really tricky. And then in the kit they give you like a little piece of plastic tube. You cut them into a 3mm length, and it just acts like a stop to stop that ball unwinding. And there you have it, the anti-roll bar with the drop links on. The easiest way to do that. Otherwise, trying to push that through into that stud is nearly impossible. So I'll put all those parts together and I'll show you what they look like when they're mounted onto the front of the buggy. Right, here we have front and rear sections of the buggy completed now. Nice and modular, so quite easy to work on. You can just remove the front or the rear to work on it independently and not have to sort of manhandle the buggy about as you're trying to remove parts, which does make it quite easy. Front suspension, same as the rear, really nice and smooth. Could probably do with a slightly heavier spring, but we'll see how that goes. Got all our steering knuckles on and everything else now. And then the rear section of the buggy, all the motor mounted. So now we've got to put on, mount our servo. Got a 35 kg servo there, a little bit overkill, but it's the only one I've got at the moment. We've got our battery stops to stop the battery coming out of the chassis. Tamiya standard servo saver and some body mounts and the servo standoffs. We're on part bag C now, as the manual says there. And then we've got all the parts from part bag C laid out, rod ends, little turnbuckles which are adjustable, and Tamiya supply a little turnbuckle spanner, which is quite cool. Plus we've got all the parts from part bag C to build the next few stages of the buggy. So I'll put all the servo into the chassis and the radio gear and show what it all looks like. Right, here we have all the chassis put together now. All the electronics in. Everything's just held in with Tamiya's like 3M tape. Servo's fixed from underneath. You've got an adjuster on one side and flat on the other, so you can move the servo to suit depending on servo size. And as well as those little standoffs in there, you can turn them round 180 degrees to push the servo forward or backwards so that it clears down the bottom there. So that's pretty much all the chassis done. Got our battery guards, stop the battery coming off, and we've also got our upstands to hold the body, like the body posts, and we've got two adjustable turnbuckles. When putting these together, one side you have to do up clockwise and the other side will be clockwise as well, so that when you undo the nut it pushes them out and closes them up, so you can change your tracking on your front wheels, like toe in, toe out. And another little thing I do as well is when I put these together, I put a little dab of grease on the end of each rod. It just helps them go in a lot easier and makes them a lot easier to undo and do up if you want to adjust anything on your buggy. So next pages are mounting the front and rear sections to the chassis. So I'll get all the parts laid out and show you what it looks like. Right, here we have the parts for the next stage of the build, which is all the steering linkage. You do need to take pay close attention when doing this stage. That stage there, by the way that B7 is orientated. Otherwise it can get a little bit confusing. Then we've got a gigantic front Tamiya bumper. And we've also got the last bit of hardware to put the steering linkage together. So I'll pop all those parts on and show you what it looks like. Here we have pages 13, 14 and half of 15 put together. We've attached our front and rear gearboxes. Just a simple case of sliding in the entire assembly into the rear of the chassis, and then same again on the front of the chassis. Done our steering linkage, just follow the instructions on that one. Ever so simple to put together, and like I said, there's very little, if any, playing any of the suspension components, which is really good. We've got that really nice rear suspension plush at the back, and same on the front, plush on the front. So we'll pop our, we don't actually have wheel hexes, they have like a wheel triangle. So we'll pop all of those on, and I'll pop the wheels on and show you what the chassis looks like when it's completed. Right, here we have the St. Dragon chassis now, fully completed. As you can see, looks absolutely awesome. We've got super plush suspension, 4-wheel drive, absolutely no wiggle room on this suspension whatsoever. Absolutely amazing considering how tight those tolerances are. So let's give it its little bounce test. Like I said in the video, I think that could do with a slightly heavier front shock, slightly heavier spring, sorry. But apart from that, everything runs nice and smooth. And for a first time buggy, ever so easy to put together. Like everything's fit, all the links are fixed, so you haven't even got to set this car up. The only adjustability you've got is toe in and toe out on your front suspension for your steering. But pretty stout buggy, and it does finish my collection off. All I'm missing is there's one I'm missing, can't think of what it is, but I'm missing one more of the Hot Shot chassis series of buggies, then I'll have the lot, which would be nice to have the complete collection. That front bumper's a little bit floppy, but I'm assuming at least it's not going to break if you have a crash. So on this particular buggy, you get like a driver that covers everything, the entire top of the chassis up, to, I suppose, to stop stones and debris getting in. You can only run 9 miles on these unless you can find a LiPo that's got the like the same size as a Tamiya battery. And then we've got our steel sprung shaft running through the middle to connect front and rear gearboxes together. But to be honest, I don't think you need the CVDs. I mean, I did say about not putting bearings on it, but I mean, I had the bearings, so while it's open, if you are going to run one of these, probably the best hop up to buy is the bearing set. I mean, you can upgrade these shocks to the DFO3 alloy ones, but I don't think that's really necessary, not for a basher. So I'll get this top cover put on and painted. Body's already pre-painted, so no need to paint that. And you get like a little bracket that sits on the top, I suppose, to so that it spreads the load from these 2 points. But really good fun build, super easy. You could probably put one of these in together within a 2-3 hours as a beginner. So let's get the body and the driver figure all painted up, and I'll show you what it looks like. Here we have the internal Lexan cover I was talking about, with the driver figure moulded in, paint in white, paint his gloves, paint his crash helmet, and then the rest of it will be black. You don't really see a lot through the cockpit, so it's pointless going super detailed in there. But these covers are pretty good, and they do stop, I can pick it up, they do stop a lot of debris getting into the chassis when you're running off-road. So definitely worth putting in. So the body's already pre-painted, so we don't have to worry about that. That just needs the decals installed. So I'll get the driver figure and his crash helmet painted, put him into the buggy, and show you what it looks like. Right, here we have our driver figure now. He's mounted into the buggy. Got a yellow helmet, it's supposed to have white, but I think it looks good with the yellow on the decals and the shocks. So chassis is all completed now, just the wiring pushing that up a little bit. So we've got our body shell, comes with a clear plastic over film. Just peel that off, which is quite, goes from sort of a matte finish to nice and shiny. On the back of the buggy, there's a mounting system that mounts the back of the shell to the body, which I'll show you in a minute. If you're going to be building quite a few of these buggies, good to get a reamer, because if you try to drill these holes, sometimes it can tear the body. So body shell is going to fit on something like that. So you just need to ream that little hole out in the front there, which with a ream is a lot easier. A few spins, like so. So you ream the little hole. Mount the body shell on. Just need to make that a little bit bigger. And I ring from the outside in first and then from the inside out, and it takes the horrible burr off, leaves on the bottom there. So basically that's the body shell on. I'll show you how to put the rear bridge on, and then I'll mount this body to this actual chassis and we'll get the decals on. And Tamiya supply you this little bridge piece with like a little body mount onto the top. You basically put the little screw through, do that up, make sure the hole is facing side on, which it is, and then that little bridge piece mounts to the back of the buggy like so, because I suppose they have different body shells and different mounting points, and those two don't fit the shell very well. Then you get a couple of king pins, pop the little king pins in, like so. In simple case, popping the body on, popping the king pins into the body. I might put a couple of O-rings underneath the back there because that's going to wiggle about. And the same with the front king pin. Just pops in from the front. If you can get it in, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll bend that with a pair of pliers when I put the decals on. So there we have all the chassis with the body on. I mean, it's not to everybody's taste. I think it looks pretty cool, and I know these buggies handle really well. So let's get the decals on, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all finished. We have all the decals cut out now, so I'll stick all these on the buggy. These are really simple. There's no the contours are quite easy on this one, so you should be able to stick them on without the help of a hairdryer. So I'll put them on the buggy, and then they should end up looking like this. St. Dragon, fully decaled. Pretty cool looking buggy, not everybody's cup of tea. I think it's a bit insect-like, but they are really good chassis. The four-wheel drive, 4 CVA shocks, all steel gears. Can take brushless systems, no problem at all. So what do you think? Tamiya's St. Dragon. Detail my little driver man up. Hope you've enjoyed the build video. They're so easy to put together, so if you're looking for a buggy for the first time, one to build, you can't really go wrong with one of these. So I hope to see you in the next one. See you later. Bye.